I want to move on to Crystal Palace because I couldn't quite believe this story. I can believe Patrick Vieira got the sack. I'd heard lots of things about Patrick Vieira. Things I can't say on here, things I can say on here. And a very quiet man, a man who perhaps had lost grip of what was happening at Crystal Palace. The results have been awful. No wins in 2023. I think just 4 goals scored and a couple of draws since the turn of the year. Yes, they've only played teams in the top half of the table. And yes, it's been a difficult run of fixtures. And yes, the next 6 are all against teams in that relegation run. So April going to be crucial for Crystal Palace, though they are only, I think, 5 points off bottom and 3 points off the relegation zone. And are very much in the 8 or 9 team battle. But I can see why he left because they've been so terrible. But Roy Hodgson coming in to replace him. I've got to tell you, there are managers this year I think probably could have gone. And there are managers this year who probably should have gone. There are managers this year who probably shouldn't have gone, but have, for whatever reason. Maybe they had a Ryanair flight waiting. I don't know. But to go to Roy Hodgson, a friend of Sirius XMFC, we've interviewed Roy.
Yeah.
He's a lovely guy and an incredible career. Something we'll get to in a minute. But I mean, he took Watford down last season. And when he took Watford down, everyone who spoke to him, I went to a couple of games where he was in charge of and went to the press conference. I have colleagues that spoke to him directly. Everyone was like, no, he weren't up for that. He was not up for that at all. And the players report, he wasn't buying it. They weren't buying it. And his record at Watford was 18 games, 2 victories, 13 defeats, only 11 goals scored in that time. And his Palace team in his final season were kind of infamous for being incredibly dull when they couldn't score goals. That's why they brought Vieira in. So, Dunny, to go to Roy in semi-retirement, having taken Watford down last season to replace the manager who replaced him because of all the current failings of Crystal Palace, which they still have, I actually can't believe it. I mean, it's pure panic, isn't it? What do you make to this?
Well, Steve Parish obviously trusts him, and there's a fantastic relationship. I think everybody acknowledges that it was handshakes all around following his tenure coming to an end at Palace. And I think it's a safety blanket. I mean, more than anything, it's just a safety blanket. And how much, I mean, you look at it at this stage in his life, did he need to come back? No. Should he have come back? To be determined. Is it the right move? Again, to be determined. But there's a sense of loyalty on both sides, right? There's loyalty. I think there's respect, and I think there's an understanding of help us navigate this. Who's the best to do it? Probably one of the guys that knows us best, if not the best. And when you're talking about Zaha and you're talking about some of the younger players, Mitchell and some the guys that he has kind of brought through over the years, well, then maybe he is the right guy for some of these youngsters that he can maybe potentially get the best out of. So was not surprised when his name was linked. I got to be honest with you. No, I wasn't. Because who we're seeing the Deitch effect, right? We're seeing the Deitch effect at Everton. And I think when you are thinking about bringing in a quote unquote firefighter, right? Because that's essentially what it is right now. Because we've never, I don't know if we've ever, if I say we've never seen this, but it's been a long time since we've seen this many teams from 12th to 20th with a 4-point difference at this stage of the season.
Oh, it's never happened. This has never happened in Premier League history. This gap, never.
So I didn't want to overstep my steps there, but you need someone that can have a feel good factor. And I think that no one is going to look at him and be angry about this appointment. No one's going to say, like, what are you doing bringing this guy in? There's already kind of an understanding with the players that are there of what the system was played. Even Vieira bringing in a couple extra players and setting up his own system. I think he can revert and figure out how to play as simply as possible to get the results. And I also think, listen, with deep regret parting ways with Patrick and the way it was verbalized, I think they also did him a service by, firing him when they did, because they knew they were going to get their doors blown off at Arsenal. And I don't think they wanted a situation where Patrick had to, have that type of public shaming, because they would have had to sack him afterwards, because then it would have been like, well, the players have absolutely quit on him. And we've got since December without a win, and only would have snowballed from there. So everything makes sense to an extent, but now it's up to the players to start performing and how Roy gets the best out of them.
I got to say, Danny, I disagree with everything you just said.
Not
all of it. Yeah. Every element of it. I think sacking Patrick Vieira wasn't necessarily the worst thing to do, but to bring in Roy Hodgson is a monumental error, because Roy was a great manager, but he left Crystal Palace for a reason. A lot of those players no longer wanted to play for him. They stopped winning games. The tactics grew stale, and they were on a downward trajectory. There was no project there. They brought in Vieira to start a project, and the first time there's been peril, and I mean real peril, they're in real peril, Palace. They decided to sack him and go back to Roy Hodgson, a man who is in semi-retirement. So bored is Roy Hodgson right now. He went out for dinner with Rodney Marsh 2 weeks ago. Right? That's how bored Hodgson is. He loves to work. Some people do, right? So I think it's bizarre to bring him in here when there are players there that had enough of him previously. And I think it's kind of improved that some of the old ways aren't quite working right now for some of the older faces. And even Sean Dyche, you mentioned the revival there. It's not exactly been stratospheric for Everton since they brought in the corner and beat Tess Merchant. And Brendan Rodgers and David Moyes are finding that out down there as well. So I think there's a lack of any direction as a football club in this particular hire. I think Vieira deserved the opportunity to try and turn this around, considering those 6 fixtures, by the way. Here's their April. Leicester home, Leeds away, Southampton away, Everton home, Wolves away, West Ham home. 3 wins, safe. 2 wins, on the right track. 1 win, big trouble. No wins, I think they're going to go. And so to change right now is a monumental risk. There's a reason that people like Leicester and Forest and West Ham have stuck with their bosses. It's because Lopetegui and Emery went, and then they were like, oh, there's Roy Hodgson, Sam Allardyce, and this inanimate steel rod.
How dare you describe Lampard like that?
And, of course, Ruben Sellers, who is every management consultant that ever came into your company, and said, have we tried turning the lights up and the air conditioning up, and maybe we can get people to work harder? Why don't we change the chairs in the lunchroom to stools? And if we do that, people are going to be more vibing in the office. That kind of prick that comes into every office in America at some point. Management consultant. We're not sure of them. We're not sure of them, guys. Ruben Sellers. So you can see why those clubs haven't changed and maybe why Palace shouldn't have done. But those fixtures are there. But I'll tell you this other point on Crystal Palace. They're not very good. Like we spoke about the Tottenham squad earlier on. This is about where they should be. Yeah, Crystal Palace were always going to be in a relegation battle at this point in the season. Crystal Palace have been 12th after 28 games in each of the last 3 seasons. I could not be bothered to go back further, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be 12th at this stage every single year for the last 5 or 6 seasons. And look at the squad, right? We did it earlier on with Arsenal and with Tottenham. Let's look at the first team not in this scrap, Aston Villa. Which Crystal Palace players get in the Aston Villa squad? And Wilf Zaha, sure, absolutely, love him. Lost a bit of pace, but love him. What else? Elise, potentially, but is he better than Buendia? Is he better than Ramsey? I don't know. I think there's an argument. He might make the bench, probably. Eze at his best, but we barely see him. What else? Decore? No, he's a useless thug. Who else? Milivojevic can't run. Tarek Mitchell is rubbish. I cannot understand. You keep pushing him on me. He's useless. Nathaniel Klein, no. Anderson and Gay are like a centre-half, but Tyrone Mings, is he the same level as Gay or probably? So maybe Anderson? What about Guaita? Well, no, they've got Emi Martinez. So again, you see what I'm saying here? It's not like they're going to make a great leap forward with the squad they've got. So it's a lower mid-table squad who should be in a relegation battle, and they're in a relegation battle. Bunch of winnable games coming up, and they've sacked the manager at a point where he can actually prove himself. It doesn't make sense. It strikes me as blind panic. And I can't see that Roy Hodgson is going to come in and bring any energy to the camp, considering what happened with Watford last year.
So do they stay up? I think they do.
I think they were more likely to stay up last week than today. I mean, looking at the relegation battle now and the fixtures and all that sort of stuff, I think Crystal Palace are more likely than not, right? I still think they are. But to be only 3 points above where West Ham are at the moment is troubling.
For sure.
Massively troubling. And I think West Ham will climb out of it. I think Leicester will climb the table. And I think Everton will probably make it. The rest of them, I still don't know. I think there's wins there for a couple of those teams, but we'll see. I've been wrong about a lot of things. But I still think those three squads, with the quality of player, with the games that are left, I think they'll probably scramble to 35, 36. Crystal Palace have got to win 3 games and get a couple of draws from 10. They haven't won in, I think, 12. And they've brought in old Father Time to save them. I don't know. I think they're less likely now than they were previously.